Calmness in forgiveness, Jesus forgiving, even in the midst of pain. One of the greatest examples of the calmness that Jesus left us was when, even while suffering on the cross, he asked for forgiveness from those who crucified him, Luke 23:34. This attitude reveals a deep calm, rooted in love and compassion, even when faced with a situation of extreme pain and injustice. Jesus did not allow hatred or anger to dominate his heart. On the contrary, he chose the path of forgiveness, which is a powerful act of inner liberation. This calmness in forgiveness shows that it is possible to overcome hurts and move forward in peace, even when circumstances seem unbearable. This lesson challenges us to reflect on how we react to offenses and injustices in our lives. The natural tendency may be to feel resentment, but Jesus calls us to a higher calm, which transforms pain into reconciliation and hope. Furthermore, the forgiveness that Jesus practiced was not a simple superficial act, but a profound movement of the heart, which requires courage and faith. He shows us that true calm comes when we let go of the weight of resentment and trust in God's justice. Therefore, this lesson invites us to seek the calm of forgiveness in our relationships, remembering that forgiving does not mean forgetting, but rather freeing the heart to live in peace and love, following the example of Jesus. Calm in trust, Jesus, surrendering his spirit. In the final moment of Jesus' life on the cross, he demonstrated extraordinary calmness by surrendering his spirit to God, Luke 23:46. Even in his last breath, Jesus trusted the Father completely, showing that true calm is born of absolute trust in God, even in the face of death. This serene trust is an invitation for all of us to learn to rest in God's hands, even when we face the end of cycles, losses, or seemingly irreversible situations. Jesus teaches us that peace does not lie in avoiding pain, but in trusting that God is present in every stage of life. Furthermore, by surrendering his spirit, Jesus shows us that true calm is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of faith and surrender. He did not fight against the inevitable with despair, but rather accepted the Father's will with serenity and love. This lesson challenges us to trust in God in all circumstances, especially when we cannot understand the reason for our suffering. Jesus was our greatest example of how to live this trust until the very end. Thus, the calm that he teaches us is a calm that sustains and strengthens us, capable of transforming even the end into a new beginning. Following this example is learning to live with peace, hope, and faith, regardless of the challenges that life presents. Now that you have discovered how Jesus taught us to find calm even in the midst of life's storms, how about putting this lesson into practice today? Remember, true peace is born of faith and trust, not from the absence of problems. If this video touched your heart, leave a like so that more people can be reached by this message. Share it with friends and family who also need this calm that transforms. And don't leave here yet. The videos that are now appearing on your screen have much more to help you grow, learn, and find peace in your daily life. Enjoy, watch, and allow these lessons to continue making a difference in your life. Until next time, calm in the face of rejection, Jesus in Nazareth. When Jesus returned to his hometown of Nazareth and began teaching in the synagogue, many were amazed at his wisdom. However, this admiration quickly turned to rejection. The people asked, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" Luke 4:22. Knowing his humble origins, they refused to accept his spiritual authority. The environment became hostile to the point that they tried to expel him from the city and throw him off a cliff. In the face of this aggressive reaction, Jesus did not react with anger or desperately try to justify himself. He remained calm, faced rejection with dignity, and withdrew from their midst, passing through the crowd unharmed. His calmness reveals a deep confidence in his mission, even when others did not recognize or accept him. This attitude of Jesus shows us how to deal with rejection calmly and firmly, At some point, we all face unfair criticism, incomprehension, or contempt. It is natural to want to defend ourselves or respond in kind, but Jesus teaches us that self-control speaks louder than any argument. Sometimes, the best thing to do is to move on in peace, without carrying the offense with us. The root of this serenity is knowing who we are in God. Jesus did not need people's approval to follow his path. When we are clear about our identity in Christ, rejection ceases to be a mortal blow and becomes just an obstacle on the way. Faith gives us emotional stability to move forward without despair. Thus, the lesson from Nazareth is a lesson in calmness in the face of criticism. Jesus shows us that we will not always be understood, but we can react with peace. Remaining calm in the face of rejection is a sign of spiritual maturity. We do not need to prove anything to anyone. We just need to move forward firmly, confidently, in the direction that God has given us. Calmness in the encounter with the excluded. Jesus and the Samaritan woman. In John 4, Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. The cultural context of the time made this encounter highly unlikely. Jews avoided Samaritans, and men rarely spoke in public with unknown women. Even so, Jesus approaches her calmly and respectfully, beginning a transformative dialogue with that woman, without judgment, only offering grace. The woman was surprised by his approach, even more so because he asked for water. Instead of walking away because of social prejudice, Jesus breaks down barriers with calm words. He does not rush, does not accuse her of her troubled past, but, with wisdom and sensitivity, leads the conversation until he reveals the spiritual truth that she so desperately needed to hear. This scene is a powerful example of calmness in the face of differences and prejudice. Jesus did not allow social rules to prevent him from showing compassion. He saw in that woman not a label or a mistake, but a thirsty soul. His calmness made room for her to be heard, valued, and transformed. We are often quick to judge and slow to listen. Jesus teaches us to slow down, to see beyond appearances, and to speak from the heart in peace. Calmness is not just the absence of haste, but the active presence of empathy and patience. It builds bridges where prejudice builds walls. Therefore, this lesson calls us to have the same attitude as Jesus with those whom society rejects or marginalizes. A calm conversation can change destinies. When we approach others with respect and calm, as Jesus did with the Samaritan woman, we make room for the miracle of God's love to happen. Calmness in waiting. Jesus faced with the news of Lazarus's illness. When Jesus learned that Lazarus, his dear friend, was sick, he did not immediately rush to help him. Instead, he remained where he was for 2 more days before leaving for Bethany, John 11:6. For many, this delay seemed incomprehensible. However, Jesus acted with complete calm and purpose because he knew that the situation would serve to glorify God. Jesus' attitude teaches us that calmness also means trusting in God's timing. While everyone was anxious and hopeful for an immediate cure, Jesus remained calm, certain that the divine plan was greater than human urgency. His calmness was not passivity, but a demonstration of wisdom and spiritual mastery over the circumstances. When he finally arrived at the tomb, Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. Martha and Mary were deeply saddened and even questioned Jesus' delay. Even so, he remained calm. Instead of justifying himself, he spoke words of hope and truth, affirming, "I am the resurrection and the life." John 11:25, preparing their hearts for a miracle even greater than healing, the resurrection. Jesus' waiting was not a sign of indifference, but of a heavenly perspective. How often do we want immediate answers and urgent solutions without understanding that God may be working on something deeper? Calmness in the face of waiting is a courageous confidence that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't seem like it. Thus, this lesson invites us to remain calm, even when it seems that God is taking too long. Jesus shows that waiting in faith produces greater fruit than rushing in fear. True calm is not the absence of pain, but the certainty that even in silence, God is working. Calmness in the face of betrayal. Jesus and Judas in Gethsemane. On the night he was betrayed, Jesus knew exactly what was about to happen. During the Last Supper, he had already identified Judas as the traitor, but he still remained calm. He shared bread with Judas and treated him with dignity until the very end. John 13:26-27. Instead of becoming indignant or reacting with fury, Jesus showed serenity in the face of imminent betrayal. This episode shows us a calm that goes beyond human logic. Being betrayed by someone close to us normally causes pain, anger, or a desire for revenge. But Jesus, aware of his purpose and God's plan, faced the moment with self-control. He did not let himself be carried away by the emotion of the moment, but responded with wisdom and inner peace. In Gethsemane, when the soldiers arrived with Judas at the head, Jesus was still calm. He presented himself voluntarily, without resistance, asking, "Whom do you seek?" John 18:4. Even though Peter tried to defend Jesus with a sword, he ordered that no violence be used. His firm and peaceful stance in the face of arrest contrasted with the chaos around him. This attitude reveals that true calm is rooted in understanding God's purpose and surrendering to his will. Jesus did not lose control because he knew that nothing was beyond the Father's control. He teaches us that even when we are unjustly hurt, it is possible to respond with meekness without giving up the truth. Therefore, the lesson here is clear. Calm is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of self-control in the face of pain. Jesus shows us that it is possible to face betrayal and injustice with emotional balance, trusting that God is the just judge and that our response can be a testimony of love and spiritual strength. Calm in silence. Jesus in the silent trial. During his trial before Pilate, Jesus demonstrated remarkable calm, even in the face of false accusations and imminent doom. Instead of defending himself with words or arguing, he remained silent, fulfilling the prophecy of the suffering servant who would not open his mouth. Isaiah 53:7, Matthew 27:12-14. This posture demonstrates a deep serenity that transcends external circumstances. Jesus' calm in the courtroom shows that sometimes the best response is not to react impulsively, but to trust in God's timing and justice. While many around him were agitated, he maintained internal control, knowing that his mission was greater than the present moment. This attitude teaches us that silence can be a powerful way to maintain inner peace and not be swept away by the pressures of the environment. This lesson is especially useful for times when we feel wronged or misunderstood. The natural reaction may be immediate defense, confrontation, or indignation, but Jesus shows us that it is possible to find strength in calmness, knowing that God is in control of the truth and the outcome. By choosing silence, Jesus also invites us to reflect on our own reactions to criticism and attacks. Instead of losing our peace with hasty responses, we can cultivate calmness to respond wisely, or even wait for the right moment to act, maintaining trust in divine justice. Thus, calmness in silence is a form of spiritual resistance that protects us from emotional exhaustion and anxiety. By remaining calm in the face of injustice, Jesus teaches us to cultivate this peace that is born of faith, even when the world around us seems to accuse us without reason. Calmness in the pressure. Jesus and the moment of temptation. After fasting for 40 days in the desert, Jesus was tempted by the devil in moments of extreme physical and mental weakness. Matthew 4:1-11. Despite intense pressure and seductive offers to escape suffering, he remained calm and firm, responding with the word of God. This serenity in the face of temptation shows us how it is possible to resist without losing our inner peace. Temptation happens when we are most vulnerable, and it is precisely at this moment that calmness becomes a shield. Jesus did not react impulsively or give in to despair. Instead, he relied on his identity and the certainty of God's will, showing that calmness comes from a deep connection with faith. This lesson reminds us that calmness is a strength that allows us to think clearly and act wisely in the midst of pressure. Those who give in to fear, discouragement, or anxiety in the face of difficulties lose perspective and can easily be defeated. Jesus teaches us that even when everything within us seems to be weakening, we can choose serenity. Furthermore, Jesus demonstrated that calmness is not passivity, but an active posture of spiritual resistance. By quoting the scriptures, he used the truth to face evil, showing that calmness combined with faith is a powerful weapon against the enemy's attacks. Therefore, this lesson invites us to cultivate calm not as the absence of struggle, but as mastery of our own heart in the midst of trials. With the peace that comes from God, we can face any temptation or challenge, just as Jesus did in the desert. Calmness in service. Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Shortly before his crucifixion, Jesus surprised his disciples by performing a humble and servile task, washing their feet. John 13:1-17. In an act that defied social norms and hierarchies, he showed that true leadership and greatness come from humility and silent service. This scene reveals a deep calm in the heart of Jesus, who did not seek status, but rather caring and loving. While the disciples were confused and even embarrassed, Jesus remained serene and firm in his purpose of demonstrating practical love. This calmness served to teach that true service is not impulsive or selfish, but rather arises from a calm and generous heart. The simple act of washing feet brings a great lesson about how inner peace can manifest itself in concrete actions. In addition, Jesus shows us that calmness in service is related to surrender and self-denial. He did not place himself above others, but rather became a servant, adopting a stance that contrasts with the world that seeks power and recognition. This humility, amidst the pressure of the most difficult moment of his life, is an invitation to cultivate serenity in our own way of acting. This lesson also shows that calmness in serving has an impact on others, as it conveys security, trust, and genuine love. Jesus did not do this to be seen, but to transform the hearts of his disciples and show that love is manifested in caring for others, even in small things. Therefore, learning to serve calmly is learning to live with humility and love, inspired by the example of Jesus. Amidst the pressures of life, we can find peace by dedicating our time and efforts to the good of others with a calm and available heart. Calmness in prayer. Jesus in communion with the Father. On several occasions, Jesus withdrew to pray in quiet places, away from the hustle and bustle of the crowds and the disciples. Luke 5:16. These pauses for communion with God reveal one of the main sources of his inner calm, his deep connection with the Father. Even when facing great challenges, he sought to renew his strength in prayer, demonstrating that peace begins with intimacy with God. Jesus' prayer was not just a routine, but a moment of surrender and active listening. In it, he expressed his emotions and needs, and also listened to the Father's will. This constant practice of dialogue with God kept him centered, balanced, and serene, even when faced with the pressures of his mission and the proximity of the cross. In addition, the calm that Jesus manifested in prayer shows us that true strength does not come from human control, but from divine dependence. Prayer is an invitation to let go of the weight of control and trust in God's sovereignty, finding peace in the fact that He is in control of everything. This example of Jesus teaches us that, in order to cultivate calm in our daily lives, We need to set aside moments to be silent, reflect, and seek God's presence. Thus, even when the world around us is tumultuous, we can experience deep inner rest. Finally, calm in prayer is an invitation to live in spiritual, emotional, and mental balance. When we follow Jesus' example and prioritize our relationship with God, we strengthen our ability to face difficulties with serenity and faith. Calmness in trust. Jesus and trust in the Father's plans. Jesus demonstrated profound calm, even though he knew the suffering he would face on the cross. He trusted completely in the Father's plans, knowing that everything happened to fulfill the divine will. John 6:38. This trust allowed him to face adversity with serenity without losing his inner peace. In the Garden of Gethsemane, before his arrest, Jesus prayed intensely but accepted the Father's will, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42. This surrender shows that true calm lies in recognizing that we do not control everything, but that God has a greater purpose, even in difficult times. This unshakable trust does not mean passivity, but an active stance of faith, which allows us to act with wisdom and tranquility, even in difficult times. Jesus shows us that serenity comes from the certainty that God is sovereign and that we can rest in this truth. In addition, this lesson challenges us to examine where we place our trust daily. When we depend on our own strength or plans, we tend to become anxious and restless. But when we trust in God, even in uncertain situations, peace settles in our hearts. Therefore, cultivating calmness involves learning to truly trust in God's direction. Like Jesus, we can face life with courage and serenity, knowing that He is in control and that His plans are perfect for us. Calmness in patience, Jesus, and God's timing. Jesus taught us that calmness is also linked to patience, especially when answers seem slow. Many times, the disciples and people around Jesus wanted to see quick results, but he knew that everything happens in the right time according to God's will. Ecclesiastes 3:1. During his ministry, Jesus was often asked when the kingdom of God would fully manifest itself. He responded calmly and wisely, showing that impatience brings no benefit, and that we must learn to wait with confidence. Luke 21:7-19. This active patience is an expression of faith. Haste and anxiety are enemies of inner peace. Jesus invites us to slow down and trust in God's rhythm, which is perfect and full of purpose. Calmness does not mean inertia, but rather knowing how to act at the right time without haste or desperation. In addition, the patience that Jesus demonstrated allowed people to transform at the right time. He respected the process of growth and maturity of each person, teaching that haste can hinder spiritual and emotional development. Finally, this lesson encourages us to cultivate patience as part of the calmness that Jesus showed us. When we learn to wait with hope and serenity, we strengthen our faith and draw closer to the heart of God. Calmness in forgiveness. Jesus forgiving. Even in the midst of pain. One of the greatest examples of the calmness that Jesus left us was when, even while suffering on the cross, he asked for forgiveness from those who crucified him. Luke 23:34. This attitude reveals a deep calm rooted in love and compassion, even when faced with a situation of extreme pain and injustice. Jesus did not allow hatred or anger to dominate his heart. On the contrary, he chose the path of forgiveness, which is a powerful act of inner liberation. This calmness in forgiveness shows that it is possible to overcome hurts and move forward in peace, even when circumstances seem unbearable. This lesson challenges us to reflect on how we react to offenses and injustices in our lives. The natural tendency may be to feel resentment, but Jesus calls us to a higher calm, which transforms pain into reconciliation and hope. Furthermore, the forgiveness that Jesus practiced was not a simple superficial act, but a profound movement of the heart, which requires courage and faith. He shows us that true calm comes when we let go of the weight of resentment and trust in God's justice. Therefore, this lesson invites us to seek the calm of forgiveness in our relationships, remembering that forgiving does not mean forgetting, but rather freeing the heart to live in peace and love, following the example of Jesus. Calm in trust, Jesus surrendering his spirit. In the final moment of Jesus' life on the cross, he demonstrated extraordinary calmness by surrendering his spirit to God, Luke 23:46. Even in his last breath, Jesus trusted the Father completely, showing that true calm is born of absolute trust in God, even in the face of death. This serene trust is an invitation for all of us to learn to rest in God's hands, even when we face the end of cycles, losses, or seemingly irreversible situations. Jesus teaches us that peace does not lie in avoiding pain, but in trusting that God is present in every stage of life. Furthermore, by surrendering his spirit, Jesus shows us that true calm is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of faith and surrender. He did not fight against the inevitable with despair, but rather accepted the Father's will with serenity and love. This lesson challenges us to trust in God in all circumstances, especially when we cannot understand the reason for our suffering. Jesus was our greatest example of how to live this trust until the very end. Thus, the calm that he teaches us is a calm that sustains and strengthens us, capable of transforming even the end into a new beginning. Following this example is learning to live with peace, hope, and faith, regardless of the challenges that life presents. Now that you have discovered how Jesus taught us to find calm, even in the midst of life's storms, how about putting this lesson into practice today? Remember, true peace is born of faith and trust, not from the absence of problems. If this video touched your heart, leave a like so that more people can be reached by this message. Share it with friends and family who also need this calm that transforms. And don't leave here yet. The videos that are now appearing on your screen have much more to help you grow, learn, and find peace in your daily life. Enjoy, watch, and allow these lessons to continue making a difference in your life. Until next time.